So good evening, welcome friends for this another interesting session, and I am very happy and pleased to introduce Professor Furqan Qamar, who is the chief speaker for today's session. And let me briefly introduce him to all of you. Professor Furqan Qamar is presently the Professor of Management at the Center for Management Studies at Jamia Millia Islamia in New Delhi. He has served, in fact, he has a very illustrious career all through, holding so many important positions and still advising the governments and the universities on the matters pertaining to education in our country. He has served as the Secretary General of the Association of Indian Universities, which is one of the important body in our country. In fact, the largest and the one of the oldest network of universities in the world. And in his illustrious career, Professor Qamar has held the position of the Vice Chancellor of the University of Rajasthan, and the I think, sir, you were the founding Vice Chancellor of the Central University of Himachal Pradesh.
That's right, sir.
Yes, we are so happy to have you. And he has also served as advisor in the Planning Commission of India for the education sector, and his basic background is in the management. So as a professor of management, he has keen research interest in public policy, planning, administration, financing of higher education, and has many publications in journals of repute to his credit. Professor Qamar has chaired and has been members of large number of committees, working groups at the national and international level. He brings with him academic eminence, leadership qualities, and exposure to global practices. So, sir, we are very much honored to have you with us, and I have already introduced Dr. Usman, Dr. Paul, Dr. Budin Gogoi, and Dr. Muhammad Ali with you. Maybe other colleagues, they will also keep on joining. So may I request you kindly to begin and share your expertise with the group. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ramesh Sharma ji, for a very generous and kind introduction and kind words about me. I thank Professor G.D. Sharma Saab, though he is presently not present here, but he might join in between, for giving me this opportunity. I believe that Mrinal would communicate my thanks to him if he is unable to join. Yes. In fact, my interest in higher education research has a lot to do with Professor G.D. Sharma Saab. Although I was doing my PhD in the area of financial management, and when I came to Delhi to take up my job, I started meeting Sharma ji more often. By that time, he had already joined NIPA. And after meeting him, I found that the PhD I was thinking I had completed, but then it was only at the beginning stage. And then Sharma ji helped me, and then we did, I was with him in one or two projects, and then later on I moved into this area. I think this module is about finance, and I am discussing my understanding about how should higher education and how should education in general be funded. I think the focus would be higher education. This is the focus of the program, since it's a diploma in higher education. In the process, we shall discuss about what could be the theoretical underpinnings, what is the trends, what are the reasons, which approach is right, which approach is wrong based on our understanding, and what are the kind of practical compulsions which governments across the world have in doing what they are doing. So, and I think you are all, as a being educational administrators, you are all familiar with most of the things that I'll be talking about. The only thing is that it's recapitulation and it's providing a little better understanding. We all know that education is something different than many other goods and services that people may produce or people may consume. Education is different in this respect that the benefit of education does not or is not available only to people who receive education, but the benefit of education gets extended to the society at large. This economists call as externalities which are involved in education. So you must have all heard about many benefits of education arising to society in general. So say if you provide education to a girl child, an educated mother, educated household, a housewife would do a lot better for the future generations than an uneducated person. Similarly, any nation needs trained manpower, and therefore people who are educated, they not only make money for themselves, but they also contribute in the national development, in the economic development, in the social development of the country. So on this ground, you could say that whenever an individual consumes anything, there are two kinds of benefits that arises to that person. One is the private benefits to the individual, the benefit which is exclusive to that individual or to his family. So no doubt education has a private benefit. Maybe it has more private benefit in higher education than in the elementary education, because perhaps the salary differential between an uneducated person and a primary educated person would not be very different. The wage differential would not be very high. But a person who is highly qualified, professionally educated, technically educated, a doctor, an engineer, a PhD holder, his salary or her salary would be far more than a person who is simply an undergraduate or an high school. So there are private benefits available. In addition to that, there are benefits available to society. And in fact, economists would call these benefits as returns. So there are private returns arising out of education, and then there are social returns arising out of education. Generally, it is found that the social returns arising out of primary education is far more higher than perhaps the social returns arising out of higher education. But even in Indian context, it has been found that even from higher education, the social returns are very, very high in India. And given this kind of relationship and this kind of benefit, the question arises that who should bear the cost of education? This question is not important that who should bear the cost of chocolate, because the benefit of the chocolates, in fact, overwhelmingly is available to the person who consumes the chocolate. Although the chocolate industry also generates jobs and creates employment, and there are some benefits available to other people, and if people do not eat chocolates, perhaps those jobs would be lost and those social benefits would be lost. So we don't find anything as such. But then in case of education, the benefit that is arising to the society is far more larger, and people would argue that those who benefit from education must bear the cost of education. And since individuals who are receiving education are not necessarily benefiting exclusively, therefore they should not bear all the cost of education exclusively, and therefore the society should bear the cost of education. Based on these kinds of arguments, and perhaps Sharma ji may have already spoken to you, and other experts may have already spoken to you in some other context, that all goods and services could be classified into merit goods, public goods, private goods. So private goods are those that provides benefits to private individuals. Merit goods are those goods which have their own merit, and by nature they have to be public goods and should be available to all, irrespective of their means to afford. So say for example, oxygen should be available to all, water should be available to all, the public space should be available to all, the pollution-free environment should be available to all, and therefore the government should spend, security should be available to all. So all of these things are falling in the category of merit goods, and for a long time we thought that education is also a merit good. Education is so important that it should be provided to all, irrespective of the means, irrespective of the affordability, for the larger good of the society. So far, while this argument is generally held true in case of elementary education, primary education, maybe up to secondary education, and therefore nobody asks question that why do you provide primary education free of cost to people. So right of education, nobody challenged, everybody agreed. But in case of higher education, gradually things started changing. So from merit goods, it was considered to be a public goods. That okay, it is not that meritorious, it is not that critical, it is not that important, but its benefit is available to society at large. And therefore, it has a benefits to both the receiver as well as society in general. And lately we are finding post-liberalization that from public goods it has just become a public responsibility. That no, not necessarily that the government should meet all the costs, but government should take the responsibility that okay, higher education is provided. And now we have reached a phenomenon where they are saying that the government's role is limited to ensuring public accountability only. So not providing money, not providing finance, but to ensure that there is a regulatory system, there is a control system, so that people do not cheat those who are vulnerable, those who are receiving higher education, and they are able to provide goods. So that is the kind of change that has happened. Some people may say that this is a change, or the public and the private is a kind of continuum. So you start from the left. So extreme left would say that it should be 100% responsibility of the government. And the extreme right would say that higher education should be 100% responsibility of private individual who is receiving higher education. Now, there is hardly any country or hardly any nation which are on these two extremes. So they all fall somewhere on this continuum. So some could be at the center, some could be at the left of the center, some could be at the right of the center. But then you are aware that many of these Scandinavian countries, they have taken the responsibility. They charge very high taxes from individuals, and they have taken the responsibility that all of these goods, including education up to any level, is to be provided free of cost. Many European countries, other than UK and a few more, they nearly provide higher education free of cost because they take it as their responsibility. But still, they might want to raise a portion of the cost from people. So they are also not on extreme left. Even in China, there is a cost recovery. Even in India, if you look at, so Bengal and Kerala could be politically on extreme left, but in terms of education, they are recovering a part of the cost from the people. So it is another way of explaining based on the ideology as to who should bear the cost of higher education. Let us now stop here and take another angle. Now, for any nation, just a second. For any nation, and particularly for a country like India, and India kinds of countries, so whole Africa is presently in that kind of situation, many Asian countries are in that kind of situation. There are three huge challenges. Challenge number one is that somehow, whatever people may say, that we are producing graduates who are unemployed or who are unemployable, it doesn't provide jobs to people, it doesn't add value in the life of the people. There are all kinds of things that you hear from many quarters. Despite that fact, somehow people want to receive higher education. So somehow people value higher education. We do not fully know that what is their motivation, what is their reason to pursue this higher education. Some people might trivialize by saying that, okay, education adds to matrimonial values. Somebody would trivialize it by saying that nobody wants to say that I'm unemployed and doing nothing, so people want to pursue higher education. But whatever is the reason, people want to pursue higher education, so we see demand for higher education rising. And as we are achieving universal senior secondary education, almost very close to there, so after secondary education, people want to go for higher education. In India, specifically, people attach value. You all must have seen a kind of reverse migration. Earlier, men would migrate to urban areas to earn. Women and children would stay back in the villages. I have seen in Bihar and in UP and in many parts of India that where men are staying in villages to take care of whatever little land, etc. they have, and women and children migrate to nearby bigger towns so that they could provide better education to their children. So people value that kind of education, so demand for education is rising. And when demand for education is rising, so it is the responsibility, whether you want to take it or you don't want to take it, to create capacity so that you could provide seats to all those who aspire to receive higher education. It means expansion is a challenge and expansion has to be addressed. We can't say that, okay, we will not provide education anymore. So since independence, we have made remarkable progress. Whatever education policy may say, that okay, all progress was done only during Vedic time and after that there was silence. But if you look at the modern India, you will find that at the time of independence, we had only 24 universities, only about 500 colleges, just about 2 lakh students. But today, about 1,100 universities, about 40,000 colleges, about 11,000 standalone institutions, about 3.9 crore students. So a remarkable progress we have done. But still, only 27% of people in the age group of 18 to 23 years are going for higher education. And there have been researchers, people like Sharma ji and people like Dr. Tilak and others, have worked to demonstrate that until your gross enrollment ratio in higher education touches an average of about 50 to 55%, you cannot be counted amongst more advanced economies, more advanced societies. So it means we have grown a lot, but still there is not enough. So we further need to expand. Second thing is that there are countries like India where there are capacities, but then these capacities are not normally distributed across different geographic regions. Even in India, the education and educational institutions may be more on per lakh population basis in southern and the other states, western states, as compared to the eastern states. So we need to expand, and expansion costs money. So one of the arguments that people may give, that yes, expansion is needed, we must expand, we must create capacity, but problem is that government does not have money, enough money to invest and create capacity. So that is where you see that although the Radhakrishnan Commission had suggested, Kothari Commission had suggested that 6% of the GDP must be invested on education, and even today we are somewhere close to 3%. And as for higher education, we should be spending 2% of the GDP. We are spending about 0.78%. And not that they say that we don't want to. Even this new education policy in India says that government must commit to invest 6% of GDP. But the government would say that we do not have enough money. And if you do not have money and there is a pressure for expansion, so what do? It is a fertile ground for the private sector to pitch in. So they will say that, okay, we come in, we invest. And that is where you see a lot of private sector coming in. And when private sector comes in, so today in higher education, almost 60% of enrollment is in the private colleges and universities. Out of 1,100 universities, maybe around 400 universities are the private universities. Out of 123 deemed universities that we have in India, we have 80 which are in the private sector. And this is a phenomena that you see in all the less developed and developing countries, that there is more participation of the private sector. And this private sector has to meet its expenses, so what do? They recover the cost. Recover the cost from who? From the students, from their parents. Now there again, for expansion, we need public investments, but since government cannot invest enough because they do not have enough money, so money is being recovered from people themselves. There was a time when there was a third source. The community, the society, they would contribute for the education of their own people. So pre-independence, we had missionaries, we had societies within India which would set up schools, colleges across Muslims, Hindus, Christians, and they set up many colleges, etc., for the general goods of people. But anyway, the point that I was making was that by using the argument that the government does not have enough money, therefore we need to invite private sector, and the private sector recovers the cost. So in that case, although the benefit is available to society as a whole as well, but the total cost is being paid by students. Anyway, there is one realization, and hard data proves that point. For example, the demand for technical education has been rising. So engineering education, management education. And in response to that demand, the All India Council for Technical Education allowed private sector to establish institutes. And today we have reached to the situation that nearly half of the capacity that has been created remains untaken, unfilled. So it is better we would not have created that capacity. Why are those seats remaining unfilled? There could only be two arguments, that either people are not able to afford their fees, or their quality is so poor that people do not want to go there. So this is one situation. On the other hand, all IITs put together all IITs and NITs put together, they have 30,000 seats, and almost about 11 lakh students sit for JEE examination. So the competition for the quality and competition for the affordability is there. It means creating capacity would not be sufficient to educate people. And there comes the second challenge, that we need to make higher education inclusive and equitable. Inclusive and equitable in the sense that enable people to access higher education. Say, for example, all of you who are attending this program, including myself, for us, the gross enrollment ratio may be 100%. Our children are all receiving higher education. If the national average is still 27%, who are the people who are left out? These are the people who are economically poor, socially deprived, marginalized, downtrodden, non-land holding agricultural workers. So these are the people. Now you can imagine that in a country where 80 crore people, that amounts to 60% of the population, had to be provided 5 kilograms of wheat or rice just to survive. So can their children afford fees? Now there's another argument coming in. That argument is mere expansion would not serve the purpose. We have to enable people to afford higher education, and without affordability, people would remain uneducated, which will not be good for the nation, which will not help us achieve our objectives. You are aware that the national education policy says that by 2035, we would want our GER to become 50%, from 27% to 50%. So almost roughly, it has to double. Meaning the enrollment has to go from about 38 millions to about 72 millions. Either you have to double the intake capacity of the existing institutions, or you have to create new institutions, or perhaps you have to do both. But as I said, that by creating capacity, you would still not be able to provide higher education to people, because these people would not be able to afford. Just to give you another example, every year about 16 lakh students take this NEET examination, out of which 8 lakh people score 50% or more in the NEET examination, meaning they are eligible, competent enough to pursue medical education. But there is only 50,000 seats in the government medical colleges, which charge a very low amount of fees, 12,000 to 20,000 a semester, a year. Another 50,000 is available in the private sector, which charge about 20 to 27 lakhs per year for a 5 years program for a medical education. So many who have got the merit are not able to go to the private sector. In any case, if these 50,000 and 50,000 both are taken, so 1 lakh, still there are 7 lakh people who have the ability to pursue medical education are not able to pursue, because there is either not a capacity or there is not an affordability. So it is these people who go to Ukraine and to other countries, because in Ukraine the private medical education is at 1/3 the cost than in India. But then the risk is that once you come back, you have to take foreign medical graduate examination, where the pass percentage has never been more than 20% on an average. So affordability is an argument, and the affordability argument would suggest that government should pay the cost of education of those people who are otherwise not able to pay. Now there has been a new term that has entered. So the money spent by government is generally referred to as subsidy. Subsidy is considered to be as something as charity. So when you waive loan of the corporate sector, you do not call it a subsidy. But when you give something to the farmer because crops has failed, or when you give food or midday meal, you call it as subsidy. So many people would argue that do not call it as a subsidy, call it as a developmental expenditure and it's a government responsibility. So who should finance education? Globally, for the equity sake, for the inclusiveness sake, for making education, higher education affordable, it is the government, it is the state, it is the society which should pay. The issue is very, very complex. I'm trying to provide you many perspectives. And I think more clarity you will have when you read the paper, which is provided as a course reading by Mridula ji on your equity. There's also another argument. People try to confuse us with those arguments. They say that governments can pay or can meet this expenditure from where? Out of public exchequer, out of tax revenue. From where does this tax revenue comes? This tax revenue comes from the direct taxes and indirect taxes. Those of economics and commerce background would know that direct taxes could be progressive. You could fine tune it in such a manner that rich people pay more, poor people do not pay or pay less. Indirect taxes are regressive in nature, that their burdens are equally on the rich and poor. Somehow our economy has moved in such a manner that the ratio of the indirect taxes are far more than the ratio of the direct taxes. So the indirect taxes are your GST now, earlier excise duty and other things. So if a beggar buys a soap, he pays the same amount of GST than when Mr. Gautam Adani buys a soap. It means, and then somebody did a calculation and they found out that almost 65% revenue of the government comes from poorer section of the people. And therefore, they said that public funding would be justified only if at least 60% or more people from the poorer sections are in the public funded institutions. So some people did a study of All India Institute of Medical Sciences or IITs and they found that it is essentially the upper middle class or the rich class which are going to these institutions. The reason is obvious. They can afford coaching, they can afford other resources to qualify for the test. So those people say that public investments or public funding in education is rather than financing to people who are in need, it goes to richer people, and which is unjust and need to be corrected. And based on that, people have given a number of arguments that don't give money to institutions, give money to individuals. So the idea of scholarships, the idea of the voucher, that okay, give people a buying power, purchasing power in the form of some kinds of a token, and let them take admission anywhere, rather than giving it to public institutions. Now, there is another argument that if you start doing that at a mass scale, then what will happen? That you are funding private institutions, private education through public finance. So government is funding private education. And in fact, in many of these states, they have already started doing this. So they said, okay, all scheduled caste and scheduled tribe who are admitted, their fees, in whichever institution they study, their fees would be reimbursed by government. So Andhra started, so Andhra, Karnataka, Maharashtra, they all have these things. For OBC, they said that up to 60% of their fees would be reimbursed. Later on, when the burden started rising, they said, no, as per the governmental rate, we will reimburse, not as per the fees that is charged by the private sector. So this public-private kind of a controversy, even for making education inclusive, continues. Then, of course, scholarship has been a conventional method. Another method was added that you recover the cost, but you do not recover the cost from the receivers of education at the moment, but you defer the recovery. You recover it later on. So what is the student loan program? The student loan program is that, okay, you take loan, you go for higher educational institution of your choice, you study, and after completing your education, it is assumed that you will be economically gainfully employed, and out of your income, you start repaying. So that is a deferred cost recovery. So in India also we had the student loan program. We started the student loan guarantee program where the government started giving guarantee up to certain amounts to banks so that people don't have to provide any collateral. Then for the economically weaker section, they said that there will be interest-free loan. Interest burden will not have to be borne by people. Then lately they also decided that, okay, the repayment obligation would not start immediately. After your graduation, you will be given 1 year's time to look for jobs. But today we have reached a situation that non-performing assets or bad assets of the banks are more as in terms of percentage on account of educational loan than on account of car loan or scooter loan or home loans. Because people are not able to pay, because they are not getting jobs. Look at the AICT institutions. Out of 100% seats that you have created, only 50% seats filled up. Out of that 50%, only 50% gets placed. Those 50% who gets placed, their salary on an average is not more than 3 to 4 lakhs a year, out of which every salary is not take home. So they find it extremely difficult, and the rate of interest, if they have to pay, that is in fact quite high. It's not very low. So any solution that they have found to make it affordable is either benefiting the private sector, is certainly not benefiting the individuals. Even otherwise, if you look at it, poor people feel shy of going to the bank and taking loan. And particularly if they want a loan on something which is intangible. To buy a buffalo and a cow and a land, they may still feel more comfortable because they know that they are getting something tangible. But education of their children, problem. We do not have any data that how has this loan program affected the education of girl children. But people have a hunch that in societies like India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, where there is a dowry system prevailing across all religion and communities, where people see girls as a liability, will they also take loan to educate them and still pay dowry? Or will their education be decided? They will receive education. So these are the issues and the questions as far as the second argument of making education inclusive is concerned. But then that is a challenge. That challenge has to be met. Then there is a third challenge for which we need money. If we are able to provide higher education to everyone, make it affordable, assuming that the government meets all the cost, but if the education is of poor quality, then will it serve the purpose? Certainly not. So providing quality higher education at an affordable cost is the challenge. Now there could be many different ways in which you could measure quality. One way of measuring quality was Pandit Nehru's idea when he said that universities stand for humanism, universities stand for development, etc., etc. The other one is the current idea that the quality of education is to be measured by the rate of employability of the graduates who are coming out, the patents being filed, the patents being monetized, all of these things are coming into. So again, the measurement of quality is on a continuum. That which measure do you define? Do you want to make better human being, or do you want to make a productive human being, or do you want to strike a balance somewhere in between? Anybody would say that we want to strike a balance between these two. It is on this quality front that most of these countries, the developing countries, lack. Amongst all developing countries, India had the best potential in terms of its history, in terms of its inclination for education, in terms of the availability of pool of people who are highly educated. But then you have seen that none of our 1100 universities appear amongst the top 100 of the world. And these days, the parameters have become globals. The benchmark have become global. In fact, the publication quality benchmarks have also become global. So in your accreditation process, in your promotion process, the Scopus Index journal, the SCI Index, Web of Science Index, these are the criteria. And in fact, the research has become extremely expensive. You need to have the state-of-art equipment in order to come up with a quality publication in the areas of science and technology. Even in social sciences, you need, the research is not. So many people may cite example that, okay, C.V. Raman had only a prism, and with the prism he did the research and got Nobel Prize. But then those were the things of the past. Today, it's all very, very expensive technology-driven research. So it's an expensive proposition and we need to invest. Now, India is an example where a rapid privatization or private participation has happened in education. But still, in case of research, it is only the public institutions that are coming up to some extent. So if you take a list of the top 100 institutions from India, you will find that that list is still being dominated by IITs, some of the central universities. A few private universities are appearing. Reason that the private institutions are not able to afford money to invest in research. They are recovering money to provide for teaching. It is the government institutions which are able to access research, and even there the funding is very limited. So you need investment for quality. Who should invest? People who are doing research or the government? It is understood that the benefit of the research gets extended to the society only, unless the individual gets a copyright or a patent in his or her own name and he starts making money. So Silicon Valley model. In that case, okay, fine. So now you are seeing a phenomena that many institutions want to provide some seed money to their teachers to start their labs. And the idea is that one research would lead to another research and they would be able to recover this money. And in the meantime, the process would begin. Now, combining these two parts that we so far studied. One is the ideological argument based on the type and nature of education, and the way the nation states need to be run. On the other hand, these three challenges in education and the kind of compulsions that they impose as to who should pay for education, this debate is going on. What we have found is that even in the most capitalist country, free market economy, so like United States of America, many times you hear the example that America, most of the best universities are private universities. So Harvard is a private university, Stanford is a private university. But do they recover all the cost? And they spend, by the way, 15 times more in purchasing power terms than the best university in India, that is the Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. Do they recover all the cost from students? No. Fees constitute not more than 20%, maximum 30% of their total cost. The rest of the money comes from many different other sources. So there are universities which own townships.
Hello?
The rents that they are getting. They all have endowments. And the proceeds from the endowment, these universities have treasury managers who are paid sometimes more than the bankers to manage their finances, investments. So the income that they generate adds to their revenue. Societal contribution, donations, etc. So many Indian industrialists feel more happy donating to US universities than to Indian universities, and the policies that we have. So now there is a ban on universities to accept foreign donations because their FCRA license have been cancelled. Ideally, we should encourage them. But then there are fears that perhaps they are receiving this money for some other purpose. I tell you one story. In Madhya Pradesh, Bhopal, there is this Rajiv Gandhi Technological University, which is an affiliating university, which affiliates engineering college. Some 500, 600 engineering colleges are affiliated to it. They generate lots of money through affiliation fees, through examination fees, through admission fees. And in the process, over a period of time, they created a corpus of about 600 crores. It's a government university, but they don't receive any government grants. Occasionally, sometimes the government asks them to provide money from the university. So the university does reverse funding. And a few years ago, this university receives a notice from the income tax department that you are no more exempt from income tax. Because condition for the exemption of income tax is that you should be wholly or substantially funded by the government. Since you are not wholly and substantially funded by the government, therefore you are not exempt, and they imposed a tax penalty, tax plus penalty of about 400 crores on them. The university challenged, but then they had to deposit 200 crores to the income tax department and then fighting. Very recently, a few days ago, a week ago, a new rule came that those educational institutions or charitable institutions which want income tax exemption should either be wholly funded or substantially funded by government, but also should not engage in any other commercial activities. If they are found engaged in any commercial activity, then their income tax exemption would be taken away. So all those things, alternative sources of revenue, which Sharma ji and which many others have been arguing for, that okay, on holidays your campus is vacant, so why don't you rent it out? Your auditorium, why don't you let it out? Your other community center, and generate some revenue. Have some shops of the institutions, generate some revenue. But now if you do that, presently this is a big worry of many institutions, public and private, that they will lose income tax exemptions. What we are finding is that so far nobody has been saying, no political party, right wing or left wing, have been saying that no, higher education should be privatized fully. They all have been talking about that no, public investment is necessary for higher education. What they do is that they create conditions whereby the government burdens are minimized. I recently published a paper and 2-3 other papers are in pipeline. People would always say or give impression that since revenue of the government is low, therefore we are spending less on education. I did some analysis from the tax and non-tax and the total revenue of the central government and the money they spent on education. So expenditure on education as a percentage of their revenue since 2013-14 has declined and is declining. So non-availability of revenue is not an issue. This whole idea that pass on this burden, but at the same time nobody wants to become unpopular by saying that okay, pay for your own fees. The general financial rules of 2017 mentioned that all institutions, including autonomous bodies, meaning colleges and universities, under any ministry, should increase their cost recovery such that they become self-sufficient soon. But when Allahabad University wants to recover cost and students are protesting, then the university is alone. When last time BHU wanted to increase fees, there was huge protest. Once again they are trying to increase fees, they are facing protest. In JNU we have seen situations. Many universities are not raising fees, but they are not raising fees directly, but they are raising fees indirectly. All public funded universities, they all have started as many self-financed courses, programs, as are their public funded programs. And in the self-financed program, their fees is very high. And for the self-financed program, they don't have any teachers, so the expenses is very low. So it is only those who do the moonlighting or they are ready to pay on per hourly basis. So this is another way of... So the private tendencies in public institutions are also creeping in and becoming very, very deep. Not only in India, but across all these developed countries. So any example that you take, the rising tigers, now they are no more rising tigers. So all of them, in fact, adopted these private models, private funding. Singapore adopted private fundings. In Pakistan, perhaps you have more private universities. Even in China, I saw private universities and private educational entrepreneurs charging fees from students and generating revenues. So, arguments are all stacked up for public investment and public funding. In practice, we are finding the private investments and cost recovery from people. Now, once again, there is another question, and then I'll stop for you to ask questions so that we can have some discussions. At a macro level, how much you can take away from a person? You can take away from the person what he has in his pocket or in his bank account, not more than that. So in India, the per capita income is current provisional estimate about 1,50,000 rupees per year. Per capita national income. What is the fees of IIT? If you want to do 2 lakh rupees a year. And then this per capita income is not uniformly distributed. If you remove those 80 crore people who are so poor that they cannot live, they cannot exist without support from the government, and you remove another 3% of the people of the Adani and Ambani kinds, then the per capita income would become very low. Statistics is a very interesting thing. That supposing there are 2 people in a home, one person makes 10 lakhs, another person makes just 1 lakh, the average per capita income would be 5.5 lakhs. So that is a deceptive calculation. But even by this deceptive calculation, people won't be able to meet. So you have to create other ways of affordability through loans, etc. Now it is becoming very clear that as you create artificial affordability in people, there are other private sectors which stand to benefit. So in healthcare, it is more obvious. It was thought that, okay, let people have health insurance in order to become available, in order to be able to avail health benefit. But as more people have taken insurance, the insurance premium have gone up. And in fact, the doctors ask you the very first question, कि भाई कुछ coverage है? And the moment you say, then the billing style is altogether different. If it is cashless, it's altogether different. If you are poor, either they will not treat you or they will bill you less. And in public institution now also you are creating private wards, because otherwise you can't meet the crowd, etc., etc. So there are a number of these issues, and for any nation to decide that to meet these challenges and to ensure that people receive higher education, how should higher education be financed? You can't be on one extreme or the other under the present situation. You have to decide where do you want to locate your nation to. Lastly, if you are convinced that public funding is necessary, then you will face this counter argument that where is the money? In India, they were not saying it earlier, but now they are saying that education demands 6% of the GDP, health demands 4% of the GDP, defense demands 8% of the GDP, internal security demands 9% of the GDP. So where is the money? With the people. Problem is not that of money. The problem is that of the priority. And I think the government that have their priorities right, they are able to find ways. Even in India, during the 11th plan, which is also known as the educational plan, the allocation, the public allocation for higher education went up from 9,000 crore to almost 90,000 crore. So when the government has a will, the government finds and prioritizes it. Lastly, and I'll end this part of my presentation. A few years ago, I was in Norway. I was traveling, and then I met a person who was Norwegian. He was running an IT company. He was himself very well educated, very well settled. and very well informed. And he asked me that I have heard that there are so many private universities and colleges in India. So how do these institutions survive economically? What is their business model? So I said, okay, they charge fees. And this Norwegian was not able to believe me. He said, okay, why would anybody pay to get educated? He is receiving education for the development of his nation. The person is spending his own time. The person is sacrificing his leisure, etc. So why would he also pay? So I gave all the argument that I have heard that this is why people pay. But then he was finding it very hard to believe. But then Norway was a society where sometime in winters you have day of only 3 hours, and in summers you have nights of only 3 hours. I had gone for a program and I asked those people that what are your working hours? So I had thought that they will say, because in India we are told about this daytime saving, that when you have more sunlight, your day should be longer. So I thought that they will give this argument. But then they will say that in summer, our working hours are only 5 hours. And in winters, it is for 9 hours. I said, how come in winters it's all dark? He said, look, in summer people have a lot many things to do. They can go hunting, they can go fishing, they can go yachting, because there is a daylight, sunlight, and therefore we want them to enjoy their life. In winters, they have nothing else to do, so better be in the office and work for longer hours. So it all depends on the attitude of the society with the kind of policies that you adopt. So Sharma ji, let me stop here and let there be some discussion from the participants. And if I'll add a few more things.
Actually, it was so interesting. Even I was listening very carefully, although finance is not my area, and I didn't want to disturb you because the flow was so wonderful. Actually, as per practice, what we do, that we take a break around 8 o'clock for 10 minutes,
Okay.
so that people can have tea, water, and can get refreshed. And
Okay.
then we continue. But you were speaking so wonderful. There were good examples that I was thinking that, okay, let us continue. So, friends,
Just 8 minutes past 8, so it's
So, friends, maybe please be ready with your questions. In the meantime, if you want, you can type them into the chat box. And let us have a 10 minutes break. It is now 8 minutes past 8. So, let us gather back around 2020. I think that will be okay. And thank you.
Okay, sir.
Yes. And I think for
Okay,
briefly, I saw Professor J.D. Sharma also. Maybe he was in a car with a mobile. So perhaps
Oh.
the signal was low, so it got. But perhaps maybe if he reaches his place, then he can, connect with us in the meantime after the break. So, Professor, thank you. It is
let's
really,
take
it
a
is
break and bio
wonderful.
break is needed, sir.
I think I can see him appearing, but it looks like he's still.
Yes, I'm there.
Okay.
And I had an opportunity to listen to him. It was wonderful.
Also,
And
thank you very much.
I'll
Thank you
reach
very
after your break is over. Dr. Sharma, you conducted very well. And Furqan is as usual, I know. He's always original and always full of analysis of this situation
Yes.
of funding. I'll have opportunity. By the time I'll reach home, where your break is over. Thank you. I've been able to see, listen part of it.
Ji.
Okay.
So we will.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. So let's take the break, sir, and then we
Yeah, 10 minutes break. We will be back by 2020 then.
right, sir.
Ji. Thank you so much. So friends, welcome back to the continuation of the session. And now the session is open for the questions. I hope that you have a lot of interesting things to ask. And I can't imagine that we can have a better person other than Professor Furqan to answer your questions regarding finance of higher education. In fact, sir, I was very much amused by that ruling of IT department. They want that institution should starve. One institution is making money and then they are putting fine on the institution.
On the institution.
Really hilarious.
I was recently in Lucknow. I met the former Vice Chancellor of the KGMC University, Vice Chancellor. He said that there is another university, medical university in UP, which is affiliating now. So they have created a corpus. Now government has taken 200 crore from their corpus to set up another university. So it is the universities which are financing higher education rather than the government giving money.
Yeah. Dr. Usman, you want to say something, please?
Yes, sir, please. Sir, thank you for the very effective, powerful and thought-provoking presentation, sir. Actually, thank you for establishing beyond doubt that education is a merit good, because you have set it beyond any doubt that education is a merit good in the context of the issue of state versus market. And also you have mentioned the importance of access and equity and the problem of the skewed distribution of the problems. Sir, I have just three queries, just three. Number one is the public-private participation model, the PPP model. PPP model. Now, one model that is very familiar to us in Kerala is the model where the government aided colleges are there. And the aided colleges, the infrastructure, the basic infrastructure, land, building, etc., are by the government, by the private managements. And the salary is given by the government. It's a public-private participation model. Now we have nearly 300 colleges. All the premier colleges in Kerala are in this model. And I am a part of the management association of this particular model. And we have seen this very effective model for the higher education development of Kerala. So can you suggest any other model where we can have a public-private participation, especially in the current context of the NEP? That is my first query, sir. Second one, you have mentioned about the public universities and charging the fees, hiking the fees of the public universities. Now you may recall, sir, the Punneya committee of UGC earlier. They had suggested that the recouping of the cost can be to the maximum extent 20% or so from the fees in that way. So there is a limit for the public universities to enhance the fees, and you have given the examples also. So in that case, can we have a cross subsidization? Any scope for any cross subsidization in the public universities? In private universities, it may be possible, but in public universities, is there any chance for a cross subsidization in that way? That is my second one. Thirdly, you mentioned about the self-financed courses in the public universities. And of course, in the aided sector also, we have self-financing courses in that way. So in that case, can we have this cross-subsidization? Is it not possible to have a better option? Because in the case of the public universities, if they start self-financing courses, they can charge high fees from the lecture classes and low fees or fees waiver for the core classes in that way. So will it not be a workable model, especially in the context of the new system or the new paradigm shift in education? So these are my three observations on your presentation, sir. Thank you, sir.
So do we take other question, or sir, can I answer this? Try to answer this. I think I try to answer this. These are three very, very important questions that you have raised. So first thing, Dr. Usman, it seems that you are convinced that there is no hope of public funding from the government, and therefore we should think of raising your own resources. I think many people, by and large, they are giving up any hope that they had, because what we have seen is that all governments across many different dispensations, they have all been going on this route. The left was left out in that, but now I think they are also going. So West Bengal, Kerala also have these things. Now, to answer your questions specifically, in a typical public-private partnership framework, the government-aided institutions are not included. Although UGC in its draft in response to the Planning Commission's document on public-private partnership had said that the oldest public-private partnership that we have in our country are the government-aided college. Oldest in the sense that these institutions were, but they have their own history, that these institutions were set up either by missionaries or they were set up by members of the community with charitable intent, and initially at that time they were not hoping that they would get any kinds of grants. Later on, when we became independent, the idea was that these institutions have been doing so well, and now it is the responsibility of the state and the government to bear the burden, and therefore the grant, etc., was being given. So initial investments were made by those societies. Later on, even the public infrastructure was also added through the development grants, which came from the UGC or the government or the state governments. So people in the finance department, people in the planning commission, and in fact, I don't want to boast, but in fact in planning commission, when I was advisor at that time, this was taken up in a big way of public-private partnership. So the planning commission didn't take this aided college as a public-private partnership. So the public-private partnerships idea that was there, that you see in case of the highway construction. I think the most popular is in highway construction. So what happens? That government spends nothing. All investment is made by private party, and then all the cost plus interest plus profit, they are recovered by people. So you develop expressway, you develop highway, the private party has invested, and the recovery is done in a gradual manner from the users of the car, buses, and the trucks. So they would say that the grant in aid model is not that model. This model is about sharing of responsibilities. But then the government regards a similar type of model as a public-private partnership. For example, when these triple ITs were established, I was at that time in Planning Commission, and it was the Industry Association, the NASCAMs and others, they were all arguing that we would need information technology across all sectors of the economy, and therefore we need trained manpower. The question was, from where would the money come? And initially they said that, okay, the money can come from the industry, from the government in a public-private partnership mode. And the 11th plan document mentioned that 20 triple ITs would be set up in public-private partnership mode. And later on, we started talking to the industry. So they said that our contribution, industry's contribution, would be the intangible contribution, not financial contribution, which was not acceptable. With great difficulty, they said that, okay, 5 companies put together would contribute about 15 crore. And the cost of that project was coming about 100 acres of land to be provided by state government. And the project cost was about 200 crore rupees. So then it was said that if you are meeting only 7.5% and then later on recovering all fees from students, so it is better that the government set up the whole thing. So in the whole 11th plan, none of the triple ITs in the public-private partnership mode came, but in the 12th plan, government aided, but government yielded, and many triple ITs were established. But there is a fundamental difference between the aided college and these triple ITs. In triple ITs, government continues to meet salary expenditures and the maintenance expenditure. The management's contribution is to the extent of 5 to 15%. And that too, many colleges are not able to meet, so whole money comes from the government. In case of triple ITs, these people gave only 15%. Land requirement was reduced to about 50 acres. Project cost was initially reduced to 100 acres. And then the management vest in the private sector with only one government representative on their board, and total cost is being recovered from the student by way of fees. So the fees there is very high. So the government is willing to accept that as a public-private partnership model, not the aided colleges. But yes, you can argue. Second question, you said that there was a Punaiya committee and the purpose of the Punaiya committee was to work out a norm that how much should be the grant and how much should be the fees that could be charged from students. So in that context, 20% etc. had come. But that is a very old story. After that, the National Knowledge Commission came, and the National Knowledge Commission gave that a minimum of 20% should be charged as fees. On that, many educationists, even the UGC of that time, they said, no, not the minimum, but 20% should be the maximum. So maximum amount that you could charge is 20%, and all those arguments of Harvard, Stanford, and the private universities in US were cited. After that, there has been a silent. Now, finance data is most difficult to get, and therefore we do not have any macro picture. I just published an article based on some 7 or 8 central universities, including the premier one, JNU, Hyderabad, Delhi University. What I find is that the fees is ranging still from about 1% in JNU and Aligarh Muslim University to about maximum 4% in all other universities. In case of Delhi University, they are showing that their fees or academic receipts is about 14%. But remember one thing, that the fees figure that these institutions are showing is not the full figure, because on the self-finance revenue and expenditure, they keep separate from the UGC. Because the moment the UGC would come to know, they would account it for in the calculation of the grant. So what they do is that they maintain separate accounts for them. So only if there is any surplus in that, that comes into the counting of UGC. So they don't show it. Now on per student basis, I found that people say that still the fees is 16 rupees. My grandfather studied for 16 rupees. But now I'm finding that the fees in some institutions are in the range of about 10,000 rupees a year. But in some central universities, the fees is as high as 38 to 40,000 rupees a year. But in case of IITs, the fees is about 2 lakh a semester. In case of IIMs, the fees is ranging from 10 lakhs to 27 lakhs for the whole duration of the program. So public institutions are charging large amount of fees. And then people are asking two questions. One question is that, do you actually need this much money? How much does it take to educate a person with quality degree? We don't have any norms. And therefore, per student expenditure varies very significantly without any difference in the quality in different institutions. But so far, no one has come up to decide that these should be the engineering norms based on which you should decide that you would get grant and you should fix fees accordingly. So supposing even if you say that 20% maximum, 20% of what? Because the cost may have the actual cost of educating people, then the cost of corruption, then the cost of research. So why should you pass on these costs to the students? So I think we need to work out an appropriate norm on the basis of the per student cost. Sharma ji did a lot of work earlier on calculating the unit cost of education, but then later on those data became very difficult to do this. You said cross-subsidization. Cross-subsidization is already happening. In many universities and colleges, I have seen some self-financed seats, not courses. One is the self-financed course. But then in the regular course, you have 10 seats which are self-financed. Additionally, you have seats for the foreign students and you charge much higher from them. Why? To meet the expenditure on other students. The latest example is that when the fees for IITs were raised from hundreds to thousands to lakhs, then there was a ho-halla, and then they said, for scheduled caste the fees would be exempt, scheduled tribe the fees would be exempt. For general and OBC category, if their income is less than 1 lakh, then their tuition fees would be totally waived. If it is up to 6 lakhs, then 50% waiver. So that happened in IITs. Ideally, this money, so they were not allowed to charge fees from students. But IITs had thought that this money would come from government. But if you compare the budget of the IITs or accounts of the IITs, they did not receive this money from the government. So IITs are cross-subsidizing. So general category students are paying twice as much as should be the cost of education in order to meet the expenses of educating scheduled tribes, scheduled caste, persons of disabilities, persons with disabilities, and economically weaker sections. So cross-subsidization is already happening. You can do that. It has its own educational implications. There is another kind of cross-subsidization happening. You wouldn't call it cross-subsidization. You have two kinds of teachers. One is the lecturer appointed on full-time basis. He is paid 85,000 rupees a month. Then there is a contractual teacher appointed. He is paid 45,000 rupees a month. Then there is a guest faculty hired who is paid 25,000 rupees a month. So you are also saving money through these manners, and that is also a way of subsidizing your education. But then these also have the educational expenses. So yes, self-financing programs, distance education programs are a way of reducing the burden on public exchequer, raising resources. But I think the nation would stand to benefit more if the government also support these initiatives. But what is happening is that the more resource that you generate, your grant becomes lower. because grants calculation still is your approved expenses minus the revenue that you have generated is the grant. Normally for approving expenditure, they are very miser. So they will not approve all the expenditure that you want. And then they estimate or revenue higher. And by that, they were showing the amount much less. So yes, cross-subsidization is happening. Whether it is good, whether it serves the educational purpose, whether it is improving quality, that's a big question.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, Manoj ji, you want to ask something? You raise hand.
Sir, am I audible?
Yes, now you are audible but not seeable, not visible. So, but I can hear you.
That is good.
That's fine,
Yes.
sir.
Now it's able.
Now I can see you.
No, practically I was facing a little bit technical issues, and that's why initially I was not able to listen you also properly. Voice was coming in a cracked way.
But
So,
your
however,
video is very
let-
clear now. Your video is
let-
very clear. Initially it was faded, but now we can see you very clear. Your camera is
Okay,
good now.
thank you, sir.
Yeah,
The thing is that it was practically a very nice interaction, and your deliberation was so good that I was overwhelmed to listen it, and I was listening just like a child listening some stories.
No, credit goes to Sharma ji, both Sharma jis.
Both Sarmaji, yes, right, sir.
Particularly
That's
Sharma.
obviously that it is because of both Sarmaji to contact you to and arrange such a nice lecture for us. Sir, I have three questions, or you can say that some issues to share with you. Sir, I am from Assam, and the most of the colleges are partially financed, as Dr. Usman has mentioned in the case of Kerala. So there were earlier the colleges were deficit colleges, and now these colleges are under provincialized system. These most of the colleges are established by charitable trust or people with donations. Buildings were built, and later on it was provincialized by the government. The government is funding only the salaries of the teachers and a little bit for maintenance of the colleges. Nowadays, the policies have changed, and continuously we are getting different directions from the government. And because of that there are so many populist policies of the government, for example, fee waiver, fixing of fees for the students at different level, different facilities for different category of students. Economically weaker section of students are given different benefits, and as well as for after examination, depending on the results at HS level, the government is providing so many gifts to the students. But the thing is that my question is, there is obviously a long debate whether the higher education should be a mass education or selective education, whether it is to be provided for a few or it should be just like secondary education or higher secondary education. Everyone should be provided higher education opportunities. And the second point is that when in a country, when providing primary education to all children is a big challenge, in that situation, how far we are able to provide, or how many percentage of our students who are passing out from +2 level can be provided higher education at present level. Third point is that given the income inequality, poverty, linguistic variations, what are the ways through which we can build up the capacity where we can accommodate the aspirants who are desiring for higher education without compromising with the quality as well as with maintaining the aspect of affordability? These are the few aspects, sir, I would like to know from you.
No, I think again, all these three are very, very important issues and questions. First, a general comment on the comment that you made, that what is happening is that the government is taking a number of decisions which imposes burden on the colleges and universities. So they would say that anybody who comes to seek admission, you must provide admission, without correspondingly increasing the number of teachers, the classrooms, and the physical facilities and the infrastructure, and many other measures. So provide fees concessions, so whatever revenue you were getting. Even at the school education, after the Right to Education Act, they said that a school would not charge any fees. So whatever little money they were getting for certain activities in the schools, all those money dried up. And the government did not provide those money.
Right.
And therefore, the children were a loser educationally. Even in higher education, if you have 200 students in a class and you don't have classrooms, you don't have teachers, so obviously there is a limit for the teachers to accommodate them, then the student stop coming and the teacher stop coming and so on and so forth. So all of these lead to compromises in the quality. Not only that, there is another kind of thing that if 50% of the teaching positions, even in the provincialized schools, government-aided provincialized colleges and government-aided colleges, government universities remain vacant, they are vacant for the procedural reason, but more importantly, they are remaining vacant because governments want them to remain vacant. So they will have one excuse or the other that, okay, we will assess the rationalization. You rationalize, you justify, and in that process all the time passes, because if you fill up all the faculty positions, your budget would double and the government doesn't want to pay you the double amount. So that is the problem across all states. So that is leading to a number of issues. Now coming to your three specific issues, you see many people are saying that why should everybody receive higher education? But how do you decide that who will receive and who will not?
Exactly.
So for those whose children would be allowed to receive, they will be happy. Those who would not be allowed to receive, they would not be happy. But then those who will not be allowed to receive, they would invariably be the poor, the marginalized sections, for 2-3 reasons. One is that there is some kind of a settled discrimination that happens in the system. Second, if you hail from a good social background, your communication abilities are better, you look more presentable, you speak well, you relate well, you have been able to afford coaching, you have been able to train yourself to qualify. So merit is also a social construct. So if you limit it to some people rather than to all, in any case we are limiting it to some people by having filters of screening, admission test and so on and so forth. But the more you try to do, what you do is that you are becoming inequitable, and the system becomes a fraud. It means it will further lead to concentration of wealth. Already we are seeing this phenomena that 1% of the people might have 90% of the wealth. So similarly, education is the only way through which people rise upward. But for education, you, me, many others may not have been able to reach where we are today. Now, if you deprive these people, and already some deprivation is happening, so poor people are unable to get a seat in premier institutions because they could not send their children to for coaching to other places. So I would say that don't restrict, don't say that, okay, the higher education would be provided only to the 20%. Don't impose the capacity constraints. Second argument, okay, even after receiving education, people are remaining unemployed. That is one argument given. That why provide higher education? These people become useless. They can't even work in the family profession, agriculture, etc. And they are not getting the job corresponding to their qualification. But then the question is that do you want educated illiterates or uneducated illiterates? Any day educated literate would be better. If they don't get a job here, they will go to Middle East, they will go to some other country, they will start doing something else. And many times, if our graduates are not getting job, it is not only the problem of quality of higher education. Many of those people who don't get jobs, they get job elsewhere outside the country, and they do better job and they do better in the life. Many people who couldn't get admission in some of the best institutions in their country went abroad, did well, and rose up to the very high level of positions. So I'll say that provide educational opportunities, do not deprive people. So we are passing through massification stage. This stage would continue until 2040. After that, our population, it has already stabilized. Then population in the relevant age group starts declining. By 2050, we are likely to have a situation when you will have excess capacity, like America has, like many other European countries have. So go for mass education and allow people to search for jobs anywhere. This whole idea of becoming entrepreneur and a startup, 100% of the people in any nation can never become entrepreneurs. Maximum number that can go is about 10% who can be entrepreneurs. So this is a good slogan that become a job giver rather than job seeker, but then it is not a very practical solution. So those who become job givers cannot be more than 10%. Second issue, you said that primary versus secondary versus higher education. Kothari Commission report, I'm sure you must have read, has some discussion on this idea of interlinkages between these three sectors of education. And this report reaches to the conclusion that each of these sectors have backward and forward linkages. So you won't be able to have secondary education unless you educate your people up to primary level, because primary is the essential entry qualification. A forward linkage. You won't be able to have higher education unless you have secondary school graduates. These are the backward linkages. So each feed into another. Now, there is a backward linkage that from where the teachers for primary education and the secondary education comes. They come from the colleges of education. They come from the education department. These are the part of the higher education. All right. So all the three sectors, it was proven, are equally important. So while discussing that 6% of the GDP should be invested on education, and then saying that all the three sectors are equally important, and therefore each of these sectors should get 1/3 share in that 6%. So yes, on per student basis in primary education, it will become much less because the number is more, but the primary education also costs less. Secondary education costs a little more. Higher education costs a lot more. Third thing, the more I think, the more I find that there is a vested interest of some people to say that people should be educated up to only secondary level. Because if people are totally illiterate and uneducated, they are not a good consumer. But if people are educated up to secondary level, up to matric level, they become a good consumer. So they demand, so they create demand. So if you want to become a society which will only be the producer of goods, services, knowledge, then educate people up to secondary school. But if you want people to become producer of knowledge, and in a knowledge economy, that is one thing which enables you to have. So this idea of becoming a Vishwa Guru. So what was the situation during Nalanda time? We have some conjectures, we have some informations, but in the today's context, Atmanirbharta, Vishwa Guru, self-dependence, they will all come only when we will become technologically independent. And that will come only through knowledge. So you must focus on all these three sectors for all these three arguments. This is my understanding. Now, of course, we often say that equity, we sacrifice quality for equity. Just because we promoted equity or we went for expansion, we promoted quality. Yeah, we compromised quality. Compromised quality. But the fact is that globally it is recognized that diversity is a necessity condition, and diversity adds to quality and excellence. So this is one type of diversity that people from different social and economic backgrounds study together. Our quality has been affected when we started segregating. So rich people would go to international schools and poor people would go to government schools. Then the quality suffers. In one of these studies, we found that it appears from the examination results that private schools do better than the government and the government-aided schools. But if you go on separating various factors which are responsible, then you find that the government schools do better than even the private schools. Because these are the people who didn't have any social endowment, any family support, and despite that, they performed better than their previous examination. So the public institutions contributed to them. So some people would say that there is a problem in the measurement of merit. They would say that merit is a social construct. Just to give you one example, if you go to a village, say in that part of India where bougainvillea is not as common as in Delhi or some other parts, and you ask a school kid that what is a bougainvillea, this person will not be able to answer, and you will say that this person does not know anything. All right? But when you ask the same question from the son of a millionaire who lives in Bombay, that how does the leaf of a paddy looks like, and he has never seen that crop, and he doesn't answer, then you don't label him as unmeritorious. So there are a number of factors, and it all argues in favor of accommodating them and creating conditions for them to enable them. Yes, I would agree to that extent that merit-wise, cut-off-wise, many of these reserved category people are lower than the general category. The only exceptions are the OBCs. In many cases, OBCs are getting as much as the general category, or the difference is very narrow. It means there might be some remedials. Many public institutions do these remedials. They require these students to report 3 months before the rest of the class. I mean, those who had a lower cutoff than the average cutoff, they are asked or given the opportunity to come, join 2 months, 3 months in advance, and they are tutored separately. But then for that to happen, you need to have additional staff, you need to have a support system, which requires funding. So all of these things are there. So that is how you can create capacity. That is how you can accommodate them, and that is how you can help them develop and grow. not only these scheduled caste social backwardness, but also people from the economic backwardness. Only problem is that economic backwardness is very difficult to measure. Only salaried people are able to produce a certificate which is reliable. All other business class, agricultural class, they all produce a certificate where income is always less than 1.8 lakhs. So measurement of the economic backwardness is an issue. You have to find some way to do that, but I think the social and economic backwardness both need to be addressed. All right, have I answered? I tried to answer your question, but then there are no right or wrong answer.
Yes, sir.
So there could be many more dimensions to it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your response to my queries. And obviously, I must say that today's session was very much interesting and educative for all of us. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Pal. Now, Dr. Gogoi, you wanted to ask question, please. Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It was a very interesting and higher education financing higher education is a very critical issue in India. But sir has very simplified this whole process. We learned a lot, but I got most of the answers from his explanation when he gave answers to Usman, Dr. Usman and Manoj. But I have one very specific question, sir. There is affordable higher education, inclusive higher education for affordable, inclusive higher education for 80 crore people who are being paid by the government. That is number one. Then number two, as we are visualizing, sir, we will resilient back to be Vishwaguru, self-reliance. If we are to achieve this target as we are visualizing and as it is focused in National Education Policy 2020, and again, public finance should be at the rate of 6% of the GDP. And again, it is said that government will not finance. The institutions should afford or should raise their own funding. That is a contradictory one. And again, as sir, you have very rightly said that without technological advancement, it will not be possible to be Vishwaguru. But for technological advancement, we must have our own research and development activities for development of our local need-based technology. Otherwise, it is meaningless to be Vishwaguru, sir. So, now what we have been observing, research grants have been severely cut down. It has not been given emphasis on research and development activities in the even public universities. So I am working as a professor in a private university, sir. But what we have been observing in the private universities, there is no much fund allocation for the research and development activities. They are giving emphasis on only teaching and learning and producing graduates because they are earning from them because government is not funding. If private universities are, as you have very rightly said, that 70% students now enroll in the private universities, and they are doing well also. The universities are well managed, and also their infrastructure is very nice. That is why if the private universities do not give emphasis on research and development activities, then we will not be producer at all. So how you will visualize these things, sir?
No, I think you have asked question and you have also answered this. So a few things I would like to say. Are you listening to me or there's some connectivity issue?
Yes, sir. Yes.
He's listening. His question is over.
So providing quality higher education at affordable price in an inclusive manner, they all require public investments. They cannot be achieved through cost recovery or through private investments. So nobody is saying, or nobody has said, no government has said or had the courage to say that from today onward there shall be no money made available or public finance has become. They don't have courage still. But what they do is just opposite. So even this policy, as I said, says that it is committed that 6% of the GDP would be invested. But then at another place it says that now every institution shall have empowered board and the board would decide everything, including the fees, and they could decide any amount of fees. So that gives the impression that the cost would be recovered, or the general financial rules said that they should try to increase the user charges. So what they are saying and what they are doing is different. So being Vishwa Guru is a good slogan. Aspiring to become a Vishwa Guru is something which is very, very laudable. I think as a nation, India has that potential. Old civilization and all the necessary conditions. So we should aspire. But mere aspiration doesn't serve the purpose. Somebody, one of the, I think Richard Benson or who, he once said that vision without ability to translate into reality is nothing more than hallucination. So I think aspiration, vision is very important. It's there, but we need to realize that what we need to do. So, say for example, the National Education Policy says that by 2040, Indian higher education would be second to none, meaning we will be the best in the whole world. Now, I was asking that how to measure and prove that where we are. So there could be three ways in which we could decide that where we are. One was in terms of institutions. And what we find is that in terms of the number of universities, number of colleges, the standalone institution, all taken together, almost 52,000 institutions, India is already second to none. No other country has as many higher educational institutions as India has. So best in the world. Second criteria could be enrollment. So we used to be number 3, United States, China, India. Now we are number 2 in terms of enrollment. China is marginally ahead of us. And if we achieve this goal of 50% GER and attain our enrollment of 70%, we shall surge ahead of China. So we will become number 1. So on these two counts, we are already either second to none or very close to second to none. But when it comes to quality, when it comes to excellence, when it comes to how many of our institutions are in the top 10 of the world, top 100 of the world, then we cut a very sorry figure. And unless we are able to focus on that, that is your point, we would not be able to become Vishwa Guru. So that is where the strategy, etc. has to come. And therefore, I will argue for public funding. Public investment in higher education. About research, there are 2-3 things. One thing is technology to do research. Maybe to begin with, you may have to get this technology from abroad. All these people, researchers that is happening in biosciences, biotechnology, bioinformatics, all of these softwares and hardwares, they are all imported. But then the problem on which you could work could be those which are India focused or focused on countries where India could contribute. So like when the developed world works, they work on their own problems. So they don't have the problem of dysentery and cholera and malaria as much as we in India, in Asia, in Africa have. So I think somebody needs to work on that. But then there are certain challenges which are global in nature, and India should have a contribution to that. So climate change, energy security, food security, all of these things. So there is a commonality of interest. But the fact that I was making was that the research has become very expensive. One last thing which I did not mention, but I must mention, that it has been proven that autonomy plays a very important role in universities emerging as research institutions. Freedom for choosing the topic, for deciding the topic. Lately, what we are finding is that not only the research funding has been curtailed, but also the research ideas and areas being given by the funding agencies. So you have to work in this area. You have to promote this area. Now, these are a few people who are deciding that these are the areas which are needed by the nation. But then thousands and lakhs of teachers could decide on themselves that what is needed by the nation. Third thing is that there are two very clear distinctions of the pure research and the applied research. And then there could be a third one, the translational research. Many times people would suggest that where is the need for pure research? You go for applied research or you go for translational research. But then that is a bad approach. Did C.V. Raman know, or did Bose know at that time when they had invented what they invented, that what would be the uses of their invention? Certainly not. Those uses were discovered much later. So pure research has that advantage. So we have a funding problem. Again, the policy said, the draft policy said that National Research Foundation would be set up, to which there would be a corpus provided and funding would be done, and this will not affect the funding already being done by UGC, CSIR, DBT, Indian Council for Social Science Research. The policy document became silent. And finally what has happened is that all the research funding that were coming from these institutions are now being pooled in a corpus that is said to be about 5,000 crore in due course of time. So funding is declined, freedom to do research has come. Today, all of us have become receivers from the regulator as to what we should do tomorrow, next month, for the one full year. So like the most recent circular that I saw was that, okay, this is the International Year of Millet. So every university should organize program over this 1 year and should submit a calendar of activities in advance to University Grants Commission. Where would the money come from? No mention. So today we have reached to a situation that if you talk to the best universities, they will say that there is plenty of problem. Nobody has courage to say it publicly. You talk to the worst universities, they say that there is no problem, we have already done it. So best universities are struggling how to apply to Academic Bank of Credit. Worst universities have already implemented. They say that we have already implemented. So this is the kind of situation. So very valid question that you have raised, very important. And I think these need to be highlighted in the larger national interest and the global higher education interest.
Thank you so much.
Great.
The very critical issues.
So sir, all the credit goes to you, sir.
Great.
All the credit goes to you.
One word I would like to use, Gogoi, Dr. Sman and Manoj and all those who are not present here. Have you heard the word hacking? Have you heard the word hacking?
Yes, sir.
Your mind is being hacked.
Yes, exactly, exactly.
Mind is being hacked by telling you that we are going to become Vishwa Guru. First, let us become our own Guru.
Exactly, sir.
Are we our own Guru? Let's
Right.
not get into a hacking. Hacking takes place in many ways.
Right.
They put a cap on you that become Vishwa Guru. First, let's where we stand ourselves.
Exactly,
Where
exactly,
our students
exactly.
stand, where we are. And
Right.
this hacking of mind is taking place in every aspect. So let's be very conscious of hacking, which takes place by making you feel that you are going to become Vishnu Guru. If you can become your own Guru, if you can create 20, 30 IPR of a national, international, or own self, will be at it. We are less than 50. Even if you attain, you come to their level of 70, 80% in the world, you will stand where. So first thing is this guided information in order to not to allow you to think in a right perspective. That has to be really taken to your mind. Second is that there has been a guiding from the very well thought out philosophical thinkers. Those where the private system will only solve the problem. Even though WTO, they came out with a big bang that it is a trade will solve the problem, which has never solved the problem of liberal trade anyway. So this, what I am trying to submit to you, friends, that there is a day and day night going on hacking of your mind and making you to think in a particular direction, saying that there is no money. Why? Where the money goes? Money goes in making the big road, or money goes in making the people? Money goes in health of the people? This question has to be asked. I often used to say that Parliament, how many times they discuss where we are putting our money, where we are getting from money. This discussion doesn't take place. And unless we decide what are our priorities, I'll give you one last, and let's not spend more time, one job or one kind of assignment, that you think that you are the chief minister of a state and you are the prime minister of state. What would be your priorities? And under that priorities, you think what should be the state should do. Assume yourself you are a prime minister of the country and your country is like this, with a 70% living in the dire poverty now, another 10% living in the reasonably well, another 5% living in a more comfortable way, and about 1% living in a very lavish way. With the 70% person living at that, how are you going to solve the problem of education health, which is basic and fundamental to the nation state, any country? So these questions we should try to ask ourselves and then try not to be misguided. I said hacked here, not to be hacked, that you, there are no money, there is no money, where to spend money. You decide where from you getting the money. You are ultimately getting the money from the pocket of the poor people. You know, 80% of the tax revenue comes from the smaller money. When those who, you buy a matchbox, you pay excise. You buy 1 gram of oil, you pay money. So those who crowdfunding, what we call. So money, look into the tax revenue collection in our country. It is coming from the middle, lower middle and poor people. And money is being diverted for few
Populist policies. Populist policies. Populist policies.
Not populist policy. Populist policy, you again pay for that. It is funded for the kind of, you look, I'll give you the data where the money has gone during last 10 years. Less on education, less on health, and more on police. More on other aspects. More on so type of infrastructure. So my Mr. Furqan has elaborately by point convinced you that think about it. Don't get into a trajectory of somebody hacking your mind and saying, think in this direction, and you try to search the answers, and you don't get it. Because there are realities, affordability we talk about, there are realities. So my point is, do think about it and try to work out where do we go, and don't get into a slogans which comes out day and day night. And these slogans are hacking of mind, I call it. And this hacking of mind, you should be very much careful about it. So I would thank Furqan. I heard part of it, but he has elaborately, patiently took it to a kind of a conclusion. We should try to look at it and try to drive. I'm glad that you all attended very effectively. And Dr. Sharma, it's your role now. I just interjected in the last moment. Thank you for Dr. Furqan for a very excellent presentation.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And friends, since
Dr. Usman, I have a very word that think over it. Don't get into the trajectory which is given that government should withdraw from education. Whether right. Yes. They have a responsibility to the citizen. Yes. Every citizen, whether he comes from a very poor people or middle class, they have the responsibility to educate citizen, responsibility to give the help to the citizen, and that system has to be really put in practice. And each of us should work and think about. Don't get to the trajectory as you talked about. Public-private partnership. I know that when he was there in planning commission, I happened to be a kind of a thing which never worked in the education process. That we could have done in a much more honest manner. There is a lack of honesty in the process of handling with the situation. There is a problem. That is a challenge. So the challenge is of honesty of purpose and honesty of handling the situation effectively. You talk something, you do some other thing. That is the real challenge, and we should think on these aspects and try to answer, because a kind of a trajectory of thinking is being given, and so that you don't really ask the right kind of questions. So that's the point. Mohammed, are you still on? And today I didn't see the Purbi, I did not see Maori, and I did not see Biwan.
No, they may have some challenge.
At some point. Okay, good. You're good.
We are deeply thankful to Professor Qamar. In fact, I like the way he has, taken his discussion, starting with explaining that how the social, personal, those kind of finances, and shifting from there to the as a overall the educational finance, how it has to be, and then the role of educational institutions and the standing of India on various parameters, like we are second to none, we are there, and very soon when the GER will be achieved, then we will be on the top slot, something. So this is the beauty of this lecture, that it has a beautiful sequence of explanations, and that makes this as one of the best sessions we had. So thank you, Professor Qamar, for this wonderful knowledge sharing. In fact, I was also interested, even finance has not been my area. I'm more into technology, but really I have also gained so much, and I'm sure that our colleagues, they have also been immensely benefited by your explanations. Friends, if you still have some questions, kindly post them into the LMS, and we will request Professor Qamar to provide his inputs on that, and we will share it with you. With these words, I thank all of you. Have a nice evening. Good night and namaste.
Good night.
Sir, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir.
Pleasure.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good night, sir. Good night to everyone.